The Maserati Granturismo. It's a car with gorgeous looks, an astonishingly good side profile, a lovely Ferrari V8 engine, and yet these cars can currently be bought for less than £10,000 in the UK. So what's the catch? So many of us will have perused the pages of eBay or auction sites late at night and seen these cars, the outliers that seem to be exceptionally good value for money and yet seem to be on a path less often tread by the majority. Are the majority right in this case, or have they got it a little bit wrong? Well, Paul Rawkins did a TED talk on why the majority is always wrong. And whilst that's not necessarily fully true or applicable here, the fact is that a classic car, a true enthusiast car, should not necessarily be something that follows majority logic. You know, if you want majority logic, go buy yourself a Kia or something, and then have that horrible feeling you're sold out on all your dreams. However, these choices, they still need to be affordable. Otherwise, we'd all be riding around on Triumph rockets or driving Countachs or Spikers or something like that. Yet I put it to you that right now, the Maserati Granturismo has actually become both the logical and affordable choice. Examples like mine here can be had for well under 10,000. And yet they're surprisingly easy to keep and maintain, as I'll show you later on in this video. Now, they say they took this car from initial design to full production in less than 9 months, which is a bit of a record for a production car. It helps that they based it off of the Quattroporte platform, so you could say it's a bit more of a rebody than a whole new design. Now, I will say one thing they did get a little bit wrong was the petrol cap. It is huge, it is humongous. I kind of get the sneaking suspicion that what happened there is they knew that the petrol filler was going to come out in a certain area and they weren't quite sure where, so they put it in as a placeholder and thought, we'll come back and fix that when we know a little bit more details and before we start actually making the car. And then, I don't know, they went off for a cappuccino and a couple of cigarettes and forgot all about it. But those Quattroporte underpinnings mean that this car is really large inside. I mean, it's a bit of a unicorn. It is a proper 4-seater. Those rear seats are really big and really comfortable. In fact, Dad Cars has managed to have a special rear seat setup made, and he's actually turned his Granturismo into a 6-seater. A 6-seater Granturismo. This car also benefits from being just rare enough that you rarely see another one. I've only seen about 10 in the metal now, and that includes mine. They made just 40,520 of these cars. To put that in perspective, Jaguar made 72,515 E-Types. Now, like the E-Type, many Gran Turismos are sadly no longer with us. Yet there are enough made of them that a reasonable aftermarket has developed, offering parts, modifications and service. Likewise, there are active forums full of like-minded people who will regularly post how-to guides, answer your questions, and are just genuinely nice people to have a good chat to. So as a classic car proposition, these cars actually tick all the right boxes. Rarer than an E-Type, and yet they still have all that OEM support. They still have the factory support, and all the factory documentation is freely available. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say your part breaks on the car. You can go onto Eurospares or Scuderia's websites And you can access immediately the original factory diagrams. This means you can see how things go together. You can pick up the part number, you can see how much it costs, and you can either buy it right there and then, or you can take it and stick it in eBay and see if you can get it a bit cheaper. Now try doing that with a Volvo V50. Which brings me on to the horrible subject or internet trope of Maserati reliability. Now, the simple fact of the matter is, if you want to make a great Maserati video that does really well on YouTube, you spend about 10 minutes on Google, come up with a load of rubbish about what goes wrong, and then you come on and you absolutely trounce them in some video where you sound and look like a slightly better dressed, better haired version of Jeremy Clarkson. But in all honesty, you haven't got a blooming clue about what you're talking about. These cars are really reliable. My source is me. I've owned this thing for 2 years. I've done a fair few miles, not a huge amount of miles, but I've talked to a lot of owners over the time. And of course, I've been right the way through this car, working on it, being underneath it, over it, inside it, in all kinds of ways. And I can tell you, these things are nicely put together and they're actually pretty damn reliable. Now, as said, my source for that claim is my own experience, and I have now done about 30 videos detailing all the various things that I have done to my car. It is my hope that these videos may help people out there save some time, effort and money. So if you want to dig deeper, then please take a look at those videos and feel free to ask me any questions that you may have. So why does all this sort of negativity form around Maseratis, and particularly Maserati Granturismos? Well, I guess there's a number of reasons. I mean, some people might be trying to come up with a reason or a justification not to buy one. You know, oh, I would have bought one, but it would fall apart on me in a week. Or I'd buy one, but I'd lose all my money. Well, yeah, that's not strictly true. And another thing, of course, to remember on the subject of money is that, yes, these have a fearsome reputation for depreciation. And yeah, if you bought this car in 2008 and you kept it for a couple of years and sold it, you would have lost a lot of money. But that doesn't matter to me, does it? Because I didn't buy it in 2008 or 2010 or 2012. I bought it in 2023. And all the depreciation has already happened. It's gone. Someone else paid for it. Many people, the 8 owners before me, they all paid that depreciation. Now, all cars have issues. I mean, even Japanese cars can have some issues sometimes. However, the Gran Turismo has surprisingly few foibles for what is a highly strung, low production volume car. Nevertheless, you need to keep that battery in tip-top condition, as when it gets low, random errors start to appear and the Christmas tree dashboard can appear. If you do not use the car for more than 2 weeks, then please charge it, or better still, stick it on a battery tender. Likewise, leave that parking brake off when you can, as low battery voltage can upset it. As for model variations, well, the Gran Turismo came with 2 different engine options. In its initial version from 2007 to 2010, it had 4.2 litres. Then in about 2009, they introduced the S, which had 4.7 litres. All Gran Cabrios had that 4.7 litre engine. The differences between the two were just that the 4.7 had 64 horsepower, bigger 360mm front brake discs, and a better exhaust system with external vacuum operated valves. The 4.2 does actually have some valves in the exhaust, by the way, but they are inside those back boxes and are operated by exhaust pressure. Now, you can fit 4.7 exhausts directly to the 4.2. For example, I've installed the Gran Cabrio boxes on my 4.2, and that's great because the Gran Cabrio boxes have quad tips still. You can also fit those bigger brakes onto the 4.2 as well, and I plan to fit some 4.7 or 380mm aftermarket discs and calipers to mine soon. The only other big option was auto versus MC shift. Now the automatic gearbox is a very robust ZF 6-speed unit, whilst MC shift is fantastic. It's a very fast roboticized manual, but unfortunately it will come with the need to occasionally replace that clutch, and that will get a bit expensive.
So if you're looking to buy one of the cheaper ones, the cheaper Maseratis from about 2008 to 2011, they did come with variator issues. So you've got to be a little bit careful. Basically, the company that made the variators for the variable valve timing, they didn't make them quite strong enough. This one's got 129,000 miles on it now, and yes, my variators are worn. This means that occasionally it will make a horrible noise on startup. Now I've got round this actually by fitting an oil accumulator, and that completely rids me of the variator problems for now. However, one day I will have to attack those variators and change them. And for me, that's going to be about 1,500 quid in parts, because I'll do all the timing chains at the same time. But if you were to take this car to a specialist to do that job, you're looking at £3,000 to £5,000. What that variator problem does is it creates a very low bottom price for these cars. My car's probably only worth £7,000 or £8,000, which is exceptionally cheap for something that's got a Ferrari V8 in it. And yes, this is a Ferrari V8. It was designed and built by Ferrari in the Maranello factory. Its designation is F136, and it's the same engine basically as what's used in the 430 and the 458. Now, when it comes to offering advice, I feel the need to be a little bit cautious. These cars are actually quite reliable, well, very reliable, and they're pretty well put together. Having said that, you've got to be aware of a couple of things. They're not just like any other car. You shouldn't really park it close to the shops, because someone might ding your doors. You're going to end up parking it away from people. It's a little bit large, so you're going to be a little bit careful when you're driving it around a multi-story car park, and that's a little bit of a challenge as well. But also, you need to be aware that you shouldn't be the type of person that when the check engine light comes on, you get all nervous, pull over to the side of the road and call for recovery. What you need to do is you need to have an OBD scanner in the back, just in case, and then you plug it in and you find out if it's a check engine light that matters or not. You get your code, you stick it into Google, you find out if you really need to worry about it now or not. This can save you an enormous amount of time, effort, and money. And this really comes down to also what type of owner are you going to be. Now, in my view, there's three types of owners for this car. There's the first type of owner, who will be the person who will run to the main dealer or go to a specialist. And if you're that type of person, then you really should be looking at one of the more expensive examples of this car. Something that's really well maintained, a reasonable mileage, not too low, not too high, plenty of service history. A good person to look at as an example for this is to look at Dad Car's channel. Now, he did a great episode on the Maserati Granturismo, and he uses a specialist for all his servicing. And he typically says it's like £2,000–3,000 a year he's set aside for that. But if you're the second type of owner, which I think Dad Cars is looking at becoming, then you're someone who's going to do a lot of that servicing yourself and take it to the specialist just for the more serious stuff that perhaps you don't have the tools or the time for or the desire to do. Now, in that case, you can start looking at a cheaper car. You can look at the more value cars, perhaps not one with a variator issue, don't do that, but you can look at the sort of mid-teens type sort of purchase price. And yeah, if you're doing some of the work yourself, your servicing costs are going to come quite considerably down to perhaps £1,000 or £1,200 a year on average, accepting that some years it might be a few hundred, some years it might be 2,000. Now, where these cars become really exceptional good value is when you start talking the third type of owner, i.e. someone like me, who refuses to take it to a garage for anything other than the MOT because I've got no choice. Now, in my particular example, this means that I can get those costs just down to the costs of the parts. And the parts are not always that expensive, and the parts that you need for general maintenance are relatively cheap. The one exception being the oil filter, which is about 60 quid, and that is quite painful. But yeah, I can get my servicing costs down to, you know, sub 500 quid this year. Actually, it's come right the way down this year because I did most of the serious work last year. But for me, the affordability of this car is really fantastic. But it does take a lot of dedication. I do spend a lot of time, or I have spent a lot of time, particularly last year, underneath the car on my drive, under ramps and things like that, and all kinds of weathers and stuff like that. One last thing I would say about these particular cars in the particular environment they're in now is because there is a reasonably large number of them built, not very many, but in the order of about 40,000 cars built, there is a reasonable supply of parts from the main people like Eurospares and Scuderia, but there's also a lot of smaller enterprises that have set up to provide us with modification parts like lowered springs, wheel spacers, and aluminium pedals and stuff like this, things to bling the car up a little bit or just improve those few things. So Tool Automotive, for example, who supplied me the stainless steel brake lines and air filters and bits like that, you know, they've got a whole host of products that you can buy to just sort of improve the car. Likewise, Dry Mat, you know, supplies lots of the stuff for the interior, like the head unit and keyless entry systems. And, you know, so there's been a number of people who've sprung up to sort of give you that ability to do a few modifications on these cars and just make them a bit more personalized to you. Now, if you do decide to do all the work yourself, and this is one of the first cars that you've ever worked on or done serious DIY on, please take care. Please be careful. Start with the small jobs. Consider getting help. Check the forums. Look on Google. Watch YouTube videos. You know, take on those jobs at first that don't really matter, that aren't safety critical. If you get them wrong, you're not going to kill yourself or half a family or something like that. They're actually quite easy cars to work on, very comparable to a BMW or a Mercedes, in some ways easier than those cars, by the way. Certainly a lot easier than the Jag XJS V12 that I had years and years ago. That had the V12 like shoehorned in, and then the car was built around it. That's what it felt like. It was a bit of a pain. Whereas this, there's lots of space. You start taking off something and suddenly you find you've got space around everything. The very fact that it's a bit of a pain to drive around a car park happens to also mean that the components are reasonably spread out and you can, you know, get in there and see what you're actually working on. He's cutting it a bit late. Just about after sunset now. However, there is one thing that's blimmin' annoying, and that is road tax. And there's not much getting around that, but there is a way to logic it out and make yourself feel a little bit better about it. So in the UK, we have to pay road tax each year. For most cars, it's £200 to £300 and covers all the road usage. Unfortunately, the Maserati came at a time when big CO2 emitters were being penalised, so the road tax is about £765 a year. That's about $1,000. This equates to about £64 a month. However, many people reduce or save on that tax by taking the car off the road for the winter months. But you can also look at it from a bit of a different angle.
Hello, welcome to Starbucks. How can I help you?
Oh, a cup of coffee, please.
Which one would you like?
Oh, what's closest to just a white coffee?
White Americano, would you like any latte or cappuccino?
White Americano, please.
White Americano, medium size?
Yes, please, yeah.
Anything else?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Perfect, come around.
Thanks. I never get used to all these coffees. It exposes the inability of me to make a decision to give me so many options. I don't even know what they are anyway. Great, thanks very much. Bye. Well, I'm a little bit in shock now because I don't normally buy coffee, and this was £4.20. It's not even that nice. Not enough milk, I had to ask for sugar. But I bought it to make a bit of a point, which is that people often say it's just the price of a cup of coffee, to try and justify or state how something is quite cheap. But the truth of the matter is, if you buy a cup of coffee every day when you go to work, and you work about 45 weeks a year, sorry to any Americans out there, but in the UK we get quite a lot of holiday. But if you add all of that prices up, even at something like £3.50 for a cup of coffee, you're talking at well over £700 a year. And that's far more than the road tax on this car. So if you're thinking that the reason why you can't really get a car like this is because of the exorbitant price of the road tax, well, it's just the price of your cup of coffee. So give up the coffee, get a Maserati.
I find this little flowchart here can also really help with that decision-making process. Although I should warn you that just about everything leads to buying, in this case, the bike. One final thought. One of the things I like to watch on YouTube other than car channels is Pali Revival. It's a sailing channel because one of my other interests is that I'm building a boat. Well, in every episode they always say in 20 years from now you're much more likely to regret the things you haven't done than the things you have. So what are you waiting for? Well, in all the time I've owned this car, even when I've been underneath it in all the rain and the cold, not once have I regretted buying this car. And I think that makes this car pretty much priceless.